Now let's discuss that further with Tony Gosling, historian and investigative journalist, joining us from Bristol. Mr. Gosling, as always, thank you for coming on. I wanted your initial thoughts on this, and how do you think we should see this new framework now accepted by the IAEA?
Well, I'm glad to hear that the IAEA has accepted it. They have to accept it, particularly after the evidence that they had actually been misusing their position and spying on the Iranian participants in the IAEA and passing that information as targeting information to the Israelis. The International Atomic Energy Authority and their chief have got a lot of questions to answer, and so it's very important that the Iranians have done what they've done and taken the initiative and saying, well, yes, we're prepared to cooperate, but more under our terms than your terms. Whenever talking about nuclear weapons, I think these days any investigative journalist and any intelligence officer that is looking at this, or military officer, must take into consideration the work of Dr. Todd Ryder in the United States, who's been uncovering an incredible amount of evidence buried for something like 80 years, but very strong documented evidence nevertheless, that most of the development of nuclear weapons in the first place, the unthinkable, hideous and disgusting weapon, was done by the SS and the Nazis during World War II, and that this weapon wasn't used by them because they saw it as not war-winning by the time they had it ready to go in 1944, but they did see it as a fantastic bargaining chip to use with the United States. And that's exactly what happened in 1945. A fantastic amount of nuclear weapons technology, including thermonuclear weapons, which the Nazis had been developing. That's the hydrogen bomb, using heavy water. That was, according to Todd Ryder and his Todd Ryder Institute in the United States, and he's exposed all this, but it's never talked about, of course, by the Western press, because it doesn't fit with the narrative that actually the United States didn't develop this on their own at the end of the war. This was a Nazi project, a Nazi weapon, and of course many people in the Middle East will understand that the Israelis have taken up that, and the Israelis are probably the most likely country, particularly because of the military attitude they're taking right now, that they may use this weapon. Must also mention the Dimona site, which the Yemenis is one of the sites the Yemenis have been attacking, which is the site for the development of Israeli nuclear weapons. They still try to pretend that they don't have, or they say we neither confirm nor deny. But there have been bombings by the Yemenis of this site. The reason for this is because of the before the 22nd of June this year, on Sunday, when the United States attacked the Iranian nuclear facilities, everybody considered that no state would ever do such a thing, that only a maniacal terrorist organization would bomb nuclear facilities, because as you and everyone knows who bothers to think about it, if you've got nuclear facilities that get hit by a bomb of any sort, that could spread the radiation over a very wide area and in fact cause total and utter chaos for tens of thousands of years to come. Nobody believed that this was possible by anything but a maniacal terrorist group, but of course the United States did that, and they set a terrible precedent, because now it seems that these nuclear facilities around the world, wherever they are, weapons or nuclear energy facilities, development, research, anything, is now open season, and the Americans have set that precedent by attacking the Iranian base. And of course these inspectors should be over in Israel at Dimona inspecting the Israeli nuclear facilities, where are roughly 200 nuclear weapons. And by the way, the Associated Press has been reporting over the last week or so that there's an immense activity by the Israelis in building either a new reactor or some sort of new weapons building facility there. So obviously the International Atomic Energy Authority should drop all their plans and send everybody to Israel and demand to inspect these sites where a country which is committing genocide is now developing what could be a new generation of nuclear weapons for them to use against adversaries and possibly against civilians, because that's exactly what the Israelis have been doing in Gaza and the West Bank and elsewhere, is killing civilians with these nuclear weapons. We have to make sure that doesn't happen, don't we? And the International Atomic Energy Authority don't seem to be even interested.
That's right. Mr. Gosling, do you believe that this new deal with the IAEA will somehow deter the Europeans from pursuing a snapback, or can they do that right now?
Yes, I think it is likely to. The terms of the original agreement and the snapback, I think it's most likely that the Europeans have been tending to take a slightly more sensible attitude towards the Middle East conflict and the Gaza genocide than the Americans have. So yes is the answer. The Europeans are completely insane and gung-ho for a war with Russia. So that's where they're focusing most of their attention. Be nice if they could actually focus their attention on building a better world for their own people, but no, they seem to only be interested in war. So this new agreement, it certainly what I've seen of it, it looks as if it's at least a beginning of a new chapter. And of course, we know, for example, Tulsi Gabbard, the new National Security Agency chief in the United States, has made it absolutely clear when she was being brought in as the new person to do that job, that she doesn't believe that Iran was developing nuclear weapons. Now, I'm afraid these things are kept very secret, and I'm going to be quite frank with your audience. I do not know. But if Tulsi Gabbard says that the Iranians are not developing nuclear weapons, I think she's probably got more inside information than I have. And also, of course, there is the moral question, which we have in the UK, represented by the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, which says that these weapons should not ever be used because they're so devastating and they kill so many civilians, basically fry them with gamma radiation, in the potential of up to millions of people to be killed by one weapon. It's a morally repugnant invention, and that people like Scott Ritter, etc., have worked very hard over the years to try and make sure that they can never be used and that the disarmament happens. But that can only happen with a mature, sensible leadership and moral leadership around the world, which is clearly not the case with the weapons that the Israelis are developing at Dimona. And always remember that Resolution 242, the United Nations passed in 1967, set the borders for Israel under international law, and everywhere that the Israelis operate outside those 1967 Resolution 242 borders is illegal. It's an illegal occupation, and everything that any group, Hamas or anybody else, does in order to force the Israelis and take on the Israelis in those occupied territories is completely acceptable under international law. Not necessarily everything they do, but certainly most of the attempts to end that occupation. This is something which has been sanctioned by the United Nations Security Council in 1967. So they shouldn't pretend that the territory that the Israelis have illegally occupied is theirs, however much they think, or pretend to think that this land is given to them by God. I'm afraid they have to convince the rest of the world of that, rather than just keep invading, taking over countries and causing genocide to steal land. They're not allowed to do that.
Tony Gosling, historian and investigative journalist, joining us from Bristol. Thank you.